Hello, everybody. Tracy, Mrs. JDog Flanagan with you here today. I'm the co-founder and senior vice president of JDog Brands. Welcome back to another exciting episode of Tactical Treasures. Our podcast gives veterans, MilSpouses, and active military service members a voice in the veteran space to speak about their service, how they are affecting their communities post-service, and they share with me a tactical treasure from their past that has shaped their journey in their military career, business, or life. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Julie Green. Julie Green is a MilSpouse, a mother of two boys, and comes from a family with many military ties. Her husband, James, served in the Navy, as did her grandfather, and her husband's family served in the Army. Having been surrounded by the military lifestyle and community through her family, Julie has been no stranger to the struggles and triumphs of the military family way of life. Today, Julie Green is the vice president at Mainland PR, and she also dedicates her free time to work with the nonprofit organization Rise Against Hunger. Hi, Julie. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm very excited to speak with you.
Oh, I'm thrilled to be here. What an introduction.
Well, you've quite the bio here. So, wow, MilSpouse to your husband who served in the Navy. My hats go off to you, MilSpouses. You guys are just amazing, and you serve right along with your husband. So, thank you for your service. And what was it like, serving alongside with your husband and being a MilSpouse, and a lot of PCSs, or how did that all work out?
Yeah. So I had no concept of the military life when I met James. He actually had he had a civilian job, and he went to work at 8 a.m. and he came home at 4 p.m. And my family, other than my grandfather, had not served. And so I was coming into this, almost blind, if you will,
Sure.
when he went into the Navy. And so it was a lot of life lessons. Pretty quickly, we had only been married about a year when he went into the Navy. And he's still currently, now he's in the reserves, but he was active duty from 2010 until 2018.
Wow.
And in the Navy, I think, if you're in it, you understand. But when James was on an aircraft carrier, there's not just deployments. The ship is in workups and they're going in and out all the time. So for 4 years, he was gone 85% of the time. So
Wow.
I went from 0 to 100 pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And it taught me a lot about myself, and it taught me a lot about dedication and loyalty and perseverance, for sure. But it was definitely a journey I wouldn't take back. That's for sure. Now he's in the reserves, and it's crazy to look back. And a picture popped up in my Facebook memories recently. He had duty, and we had, at the time, our oldest was, I think, 3 or maybe 2. And we just took him dinner. And I looked at my husband, and I'm like, it was just like a normal Tuesday for our son to have dinner on the flight deck of an aircraft. But it was 8 years of active duty, but it was fun. That's for sure.
Yeah. So, I've spoken with another, woman, Megan Ogilvy, and she was a military brat, and she described her mother, being, a career MilSpouse, but she actually said that her mother was the CEO of the family, because, and I would imagine that that's true too. You have 2 boys, and you are with him, with your husband being gone so often, you are the CEO of your family, so you are that anchor, right? That strong sense of stability and support for your sons, definitely, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's, and I worked full time too, while he, was active duty. And there's a fair bit of, especially in the Navy, when he was in workups and he would be gone for 4 weeks, home for 2, gone for 3 weeks, home for 1.
Wow.
Learning that push and pull of of taking all of that and running with it, and then allowing him to come home and reintegrate himself into that, like every so often, was tough. But it was, and he had a 9-month deployment in 2015. So that was where I got most of my chief executive officer experience over the household. But it's a lot of learning how to take the reins, learning how to loosen the reins. And then, there's the hard part of learning how to let go of the reins when you need to, when you're in those situations.
Sure. Yeah, because I'm sure, when at those times when he comes home, he still wants to feel like he's the man of the house and in charge. And so there's a lot, I'm sure, of things that you probably need to say, oh, no, let me just let go of this, let him handle it. Definitely. I'm sure that push-pull was kind of sort of difficult and challenging to navigate. So what was it like when he transitioned back into the reserve and came off of active duty? What was that like for you and your family?
I think for me, well, for for him, when he transitioned into the reserves, I think it was the right step, because I think if he had just retired, I don't know that he'll ever be ready to take his hand or foot completely out of the Navy. It is definitely, we used to say the second love of his life. We used to call the USS Roosevelt the other woman, because she had such a big presence in our life. But it was hard for him. It was hard to kind of transition into every day. He had a strong purpose. He had a really strong reason to get up and go to work in the morning. And he has a great civilian job now, which he truly loves. But I think it was really hard for him to kind of make that mental transition of, active duty sailor to just a regular guy. And, as his partner, I think it was hard for me, because I was so excited to have him, here every morning, and he was at the dinner table every night. But I think that whether you're transitioning into the reserves or you're just transitioning into civilian life, it's a hard journey. And I don't know that I expected it to be like that tough. I just kind of was like, oh, this is great. He's going to be relieved and everything's going to be perfect. And so the reserves was a good step. It's definitely not a ship at all. But I think that there was a lot of like learning to give ourselves grace, and learning. Thankfully, the military does teach you that it doesn't always go as you planned it to. You well know that lesson. Hurry up and wait. And so I think there was a lot of just kind of having to absorb that. And he was really lucky. Like I said, he came into a great job. And I know that that's a really tough transition for a lot of veterans, but it's hard to turn that switch off. And it's hard to watch someone that you love try to figure out, because you can't do it for them. There's no, kind of way that I could say like everything's going to be fine when they're trying to figure out, how they fit in and how they kind of can mold themselves into this community and society that is very different from where they've been the past, however many years. So it was tough. But like anything else, we, like I said earlier, we just learned to give ourselves some grace and to kind of let those feelings kind of settle. And he's done amazing work with the reserves. So he found his place there. And I think he found his footing pretty quickly, but it was tough.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure it was. Well, I'm glad he's in a great place and doing well. That's awesome. So you are now involved with Mainland PR as their vice president. Can you tell me about the work that you're doing there?
Yeah, so when we actually were stationed, we got our first permanent station in 2012. I knew pretty quickly that I needed to work, that I needed to do something. I am a very independent person by nature, but I also do well when I'm busy. So I took a job with a company that no one had ever heard of. There were 5 people. It was a startup and it was a franchise brand. And I had no idea what I was getting into. So over the next 7 years, I grew into the brand manager. It was a national outdoor pest control franchise that I worked for. And I was a client of Mainland while I was the brand manager. And so although I've been at the agency 2 years, it feels like I've been a part of that team forever. But we specialize in marketing for franchise brands. So PR, content, digital, we are specialized in knowing how to help franchises grow their brands, how to get their messaging out, and how to tell their story, which has always been a really big passion of mine. So I feel like franchising is a job that you kind of fall into, and then you look back 15 years later and you're like, I'm still in the franchising industry, but it was a job that I am forever thankful for because it kept me sane during active duty, introduced me to Mainland, and here I am now.
That's awesome. So who's your favorite client?
Oh my goodness. Well, this is recorded and is going to be posted on the internet, but it might start with a J and it could possibly end with a dog. That's all I'll say.
Good answer. That's great. Hello, listeners. We really want to thank you for tuning in and enjoying all the episodes of Tactical Treasures. We're talking to amazing veterans and MilSpouses in the veteran space, and it's just been an amazing experience. And thank you so much for tuning in. But hey, if you want to check out JDog, look us up on jdog.com. And if you go to jdog.com, you'll find out everything about JDog. You'll be able to book a service, either junk removal and hauling or our carpet cleaning and floor care service. You can even look into our franchise, or you can even look at employment. Our JDog franchise owners are hiring all across the country, and they love to hire their fellow veterans and service members. And if you want to know more about our JDog Foundation, we're doing amazing things supporting irreverent warriors and stop soldier suicide, preventing PTSD, and combating veteran suicide. So check us out, jdog.com. Thank you. So I understand you're also involved with an organization, Rise Against Hunger. How did you find out about them, and how'd you get involved there?
Yeah. So Rise Against Hunger is a nonprofit organization that I actually got involved with through our church. So we're pretty active in our local church here in Raleigh. And they coordinate packaging and distribution of food for those that have food insecurity issues. And it just is something that, when I learned about Rise Against Hunger and the church started getting involved, it was really something that I didn't realize was a huge problem. And I mean, even the school that my kids go to, which, right. We're in Raleigh, North Carolina, we live in a great neighborhood, we live in a great community, but there was food insecurity issues. And so it was eye-opening for me to see that. And I mean, food is just one of the most, if not the most basic necessity that we all need. And so, right. I just kind of fell in love with the organization, with the team that we work with here in Raleigh. There's a couple of times a year our church as a whole gets together and packages foods, but we're constantly doing food drives for them. But I've just really enjoyed seeing the difference that it makes in our community. But I mean, Rise Against Hunger is a great organization, but it just was kind of eye-opening that there is food insecurity in all of our communities. And so I've loved being a part of making sure that we're doing something about that and teaching my kids about that,
Sure.
Like your life is, your basic needs are covered and not everyone is as lucky as we are. And so teaching them that helping others and that not every life looks the same, has been a really great lesson for them.
Sure. And I'm sure there's even more going on with that now, with the cost of inflation and everything. I'm sure you've probably seen an uptick in that sort of thing.
Yeah. COVID, it was really a struggle, and it was a lot of moving pieces and, making sure that, because I referenced schools earlier, like a lot of children, the only meal, like hot meal that they see is the one that they get at breakfast and lunch at schools. And so when there were shutdowns, that became a huge problem in communities, and not just here in North Carolina. Like that was a problem across the country.
Right.
And that was a time where it really was like, okay, what are we doing? Like, how are we mobilizing this to make sure that these kids, and there's a couple of organizations that we work with through Rise Against Hunger for like fresh produce, because that's another thing that, it's expensive. Not a lot of families can afford. So COVID, there was definitely a lot of that. And then this year, the economy, we're definitely in, it's tumultuous. It's not inflation, and supply chain issues have caused a lot of kind of kinks in that chain, if you will. So it's been, the past couple of years have been really tough. Right. They've been tough. Right. So Rise Against Hunger has done really, really great things.
Yeah. Well, it's great that there's an organization out there that's kind of taking the bull by the horns with all of that and trying to make a difference. Definitely. Hello, everybody. How are you doing today? We've just been chatting with Julie Green. She is a MilSpouse and a mother to 2 boys. She's also the vice president at Mainland PR. And she is involved with an amazing organization called Rise Against Hunger. And it is a international hunger relief nonprofit organization that coordinates the packaging and distribution of food, emergency response and crisis relief, and community empowerment initiatives for people in developing nations. If you would like to find out more information and learn how you can donate or volunteer your time to Rise Against Hunger, you can go to riseagainsthunger.org. If you want to reach out to Julie Green, you can find her on LinkedIn, and make sure you look for her title as VP of Mainland. Just want to make sure you get the right Julie Green. And if you want to find out more about Mainland and the PR firm, you can just go to hellomainland.com, and you can see all the services that they offer. So back to the podcast. So this brings us to your treasure. What would you like to share with us today?
That was a hard thing to pick. So my grandfather served in the U.S. Navy too. He was a gunner's mate. And of course, my husband, who has been in the Navy for 12 years now, I have a lot of my grandfather's documents and original photographs from his time in the Navy. And so I actually have, one of the things that I have from him is his honorable discharge. It was from 1945. And so this, usually hangs on it hangs on my office wall. We have a huge military wall. And then I also picked, which made my husband laugh, but during his deployment, he was in Dubai, and he got me this very sparkly camel.
I love it.
It sits, usually you would see it. It sits right here, and I see it every day. And it just kind of is my reminder of life and all of these lessons that were learned along the way and through our marriage and, raising 2 crazy boys. So I have that hangs in my office. And then I have this here, and it just kind of brings everything full circle for me, like our military circle. And, James continuing that naval legacy in our family is something I'm hugely proud of. I was super close to my grandfather. And so, those are my 2 treasures. I didn't pick just one. I had to have 2.
That's okay. I love it. I love your treasures. That's very special, to keep, I think, mementos and past memorabilia from, a family service. I know my grandfather, Sicilian born, lived in Sicily. And fun fact, he came over and earned his American citizenship by fighting in World War I. And I actually have his flag that graced his coffin upon his death. And that flag actually graces our missing man table that we set up for our discovery days that we do here at JDog. So we usually rent a private room in a restaurant and we set up the missing man table, and we do a toast to remember our fallen heroes. And my father's flag sits on, or my grandfather's flag sits on that table. So
that's amazing. That's amazing. We have we have a wall, and James's brother, who is in the National Guard and flies Apaches, was deployed while we were getting married, but he somehow got his R&R during our wedding, and a couple of days before he flew home, he flew a flag over his helicopter, because they do, and then he brought it to us like at our wedding, so it's on our wall. So I know how special those flags are, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's really, and I think it's important that we keep those mementos and that memorabilia, because that kind of stuff, I believe, is kind of part of your legacy and something that you pass down to your children, and helps them to understand and recognize the importance of military service, So, wow, that's a really great treasure. So what advice would you have for your fellow MilSpouses who are kind of struggling with balance and all the different aspects of military life? Do you have any advice or a couple little takeaways that you can share?
I think for me, the biggest piece that I always tried to remember, and that I have always encouraged my friends who are military spouses and, who are struggling, is I think it's really easy there are a lot of emotions that come along with being separated from your partner, and they're likened to grief. Like you go through sadness and anger and dissonance, and I was just always really careful to make sure that those were placed somewhere other than James, who's my husband. Mm-hmm. I think it's really important to remember that they are, I used to say to myself 100 times a day, he didn't choose this deployment. He did not choose to leave us. And so my biggest advice would be to find something that you're passionate about that keeps your mind busy and makes you tired at the end of the day. And whether that's being with your children or, I had a full-time job that I truly, truly loved, that helped me keep my headspace clear, so that when we were together via technology, our time was spent not on having to work through emotions that had caused, like arguments or fights, because whether or not he was an ocean away or he was, just down the street, like I had to remember that we were doing it together, and that it does fall on the military spouse quite a bit to kind of be that anchor, as you were saying, and to be that voice of reason. And so I personally always tried to make my life kind of stand on its own in a way that, our time together was special. And I know that that's like very easily said than done. It's like your husband is on a 9-hour time difference and you've got 2 screaming kids and you just want to yell at someone, and then he FaceTimes and he wants you to drop everything. And it's, we have those moments too. But I think just remembering that there are emotions that come along with it. And I always, whether or not it's a military spouse or anyone, like basic human emotions have a place in your life for a reason. And I think feeling those is really important. And then just keeping yourself busy. Everybody says it and it sounds so trite, when someone's like, I don't know what to do, my husband's leaving for 6 months. It's like, you got to stay busy. I planned something once a month. He was gone for 9 months. I had one thing every month to look forward to, even if it was like my mom coming or, a discovery day dinner, because I knew I was going to get a nice glass of wine. Like there was something every month that I had to look forward to. So I think those are really important. I think making sure that your emotions are not placed on each other when those times get hard, and that you're working through those together. And then you just got to find, whether it's your kids or a nonprofit, if you're volunteering, or a job, just making sure that you're staying almost challenged in another way, like in your own way. Cause I felt like that made it a lot easier when real life things happened. Like,
Sure.
I remember one time our oldest woke up with 105 fever, and
Oh
I
my
had to
gosh.
take him to the emergency room.
Yeah.
Because like, obviously he had 105 fever, and I had no way to get a hold of James because he's on an aircraft carrier in the middle of the ocean. And
Right.
I just remember sending an email, "Hi, we're in the hospital." And I remember sitting in the waiting room thinking, like, I'm so mad. Like, I'm so mad that I'm doing this by myself, and I'm scared and I'm mad. And then you just have to sit back and ask yourself, like, who am I mad at? What am I mad at? Like, I'm scared. And I think being vulnerable in those moments is also important because, I wasn't mad at him. Like, we knew
Right.
where he was going to be. So yeah, I just think it's important to recognize that your feelings are really valid, and
Yeah.
it's just, you have to make sure that you're not taking them out on each other.
Yeah. I like that advice. Try to like plan one special event a month. That's a great idea.
I did.
I
And
like that.
it was never like, a couple of them were big. Like, of course, I turned 30 the weekend he deployed.
Oh, great.
And my sister was like, planned a whole trip to New York for like 2 weeks later with
Oh,
like two of
wow.
my best girlfriends. And it was perfect because he left and it was awful. But in 2 weeks I had that, and
Yeah.
then I remember the next month was Easter. So we were going to my dad. My dad lives at the beach. We were going to go see my dad. So I had
Yeah.
these like little milestones. It's like, okay, if I can make it to 2 weeks, I get to go to New York. If I make it 3 weeks, we get to go to the beach. And you
Right.
start recognizing that you take it in chunks.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's 1 hour at a time. But yeah, those were really important for me, like personally, to just make sure that I had one exciting thing to kind of get me through to
Right.
the next bucket of time.
Bucket of time. I love it. That's great. So before you go, tell us where we can find you, or Mainland PR and
Yeah.
Rise Against Hunger. Can people like donate to that organization, and how would they go
Yeah.
about that?
Yeah. So hellomainland.com is where you can find Mainland and everything that we do. If you have questions about the agency, I'm on LinkedIn, Julie Green. Like you said, I'm the vice president at Mainland. So if you see that title, then you found the right Julie Green. And yeah, Rise Against Hunger I'm checking to see if there's an online, you can donate. There's a place on their website. And if you're local, they're always needing volunteers. And even if it's not Rise Against Hunger, like, I definitely encourage people to check out local nonprofits in your area that are, working against food insecurity in your community. Cause I think it's probably a lot of eye-opening as it was to me. So even if it's not Rise Against Hunger, I would definitely take a look. But hellomainland.com, Julie Green, I'm on LinkedIn, and happy to connect with any of your listeners. That's for sure.
That's great. That's great. Well, thank you so much. I know you're a busy lady, but I appreciate you coming on and sharing your very special treasure and talking about your military life. And I really appreciate you sharing with us today. Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. I'm forever grateful that JDog came into my hands at Mainland, because the work that you guys are doing for veterans and transitioning veterans into civilian life is very close to my heart. So it has always been a joy, and I was happy to be here today.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Thank you. I love what I do every day. It's awesome. And it was so great to speak with you. Thanks for coming
You
on.
too. Absolutely.
Take care. Bye. Hello, viewers and listeners. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Tactical Treasures podcast, where we've been speaking with Julie Green. She's a MilSpouse. Her husband, James, served in the Navy and now is in the Navy Reserve. She is also the vice president of Mainland PR, and she's involved with a really great organization called Rise Against Hunger. It's an international hunger relief nonprofit organization that coordinates the packaging and distribution of food, emergency response and crisis relief aid, and community empowerment initiatives for people in developing nations. If you would like to find out more information or learn how to donate or volunteer your time, you can check out riseagainsthunger.org. And if you want to connect with Julie Green, you can find her on LinkedIn and look for her title that says VP at Mainland, and then you'll make sure you have the right Julie Green. And if you're interested in the services that they offer, you can check out hellomainland.com, and you can see all the great work that they're doing there in marketing and PR. So thanks again for listening and viewing, and we'll see you again soon on another exciting episode of Tactical Treasures.